My my name is Mete. Last name is Bayyigit. Last name is a bit hard to pronounce. I have seen many versions of that in my life in the U.S. And originally, as my last name and first name probably kind of point out, I was born and I grew up in Turkey, and I have actually finished. My bachelor's and graduate degrees in industrial engineering and operations research from a university in Turkey. And I have actually come to US, come to Portland State Engineering Management Department to pursue my PhD. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. So I'll tell you the reasons. Maybe that's the first time even Dr. Kokaglu would hear it, but I needed money. I had to get married, and I had to I had that dream that I'm going to leave the school for a few years and come back and finish my PhD. It didn't happen. The plan didn't work out the way I anticipated it. But, I actually have ended up getting another graduate degree in engineering management. That was a long time back. I think you're talking about in 1994, 1995, if my memory serves me right. And after graduating, after getting my degree from PSU in engineering management, I actually have joined the industry as an industrial engineer. So I'm actually a kind of a big believer. You call me biased, but I'm a big believer of applying industrial engineering and OR techniques to everything that we do in life. But I started in the semiconductor industry, and I did not even know what semiconductor was back then. I had no idea. The first time I stepped my foot into the door of a semiconductor fab, I was just completely blown away how clean that place was, because I always kind of thought about the factories were more like kind of dirty environments, with machines running and noise and all that stuff. But some of you might know it's a very clean environment where the semiconductor devices get manufactured. And that was actually an amazing thing for me, because we're talking about mid-1990s, semiconductor factories are called fabs. Actually, back then, some of them were called even labs. And I always wondered back then why some of my employees called their factories labs, but then I realized over time, they were at the very early stages of their operational excellence. They were actually pretty much a engineering shop, if you will, right? And hence they called them labs back then. So I actually caught the semiconductor industry, I tell people, when they were transitioning from being a lab to being a factory, being a fab. Because my industrial engineering skills came in pretty handy in terms of helping them improve productivity, right? Improve their throughput, improve their yield, improve their, gearing ratios, so on and so forth. But the interesting thing is, what I realized over time, there was a bunch of inefficiencies in the factories that I have visited that was driven by the lack of information that the factory had. So I was always complaining about, why we do not have the systems to communicate that information, that data, to be able to really communicate or guide the operators, guide the technicians as to what to do in the factory. Like a simple example is, in a semiconductor factory, you have multi-million-dollar tools and literally, a very, very expensive capital investment. It gets even more expensive now. And we would have, operators running those tools, and they would go down, and you would have to reroute the work in progress to somewhere else, but you wouldn't know where, and you wouldn't know in which sequence you're going to have to process that queue, if you will, right? A simple dispatching system in today's world, as we would call it. And I remember one day, one of the IT directors in the company that I was working for. He tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Why don't you come, rather than complaining, why don't you come become a part of the solution and be a part of IT?" So that's actually how I got my kind of entry into the information technology world, because, from being an industrial engineer, I had quite a bit of understanding of how you can utilize the technology, but I got my hands dirty after I got the job in an IT group at a semiconductor fab. That's kind of how I started my really tech journey in the semiconductors, in the industry itself. But over time, I realized that technology is great, but I have to learn a lot more about operations. I have to have a much better understanding of operations to be able to even identify the problems that you can solve by leveraging technology. So in that, I actually had I had actually decided to go back to supply chain operations and do some work there so that I can actually, really bring a little bit more understanding of the operational problems that can be solved through the technological means. And that also worked to my advantage, because when I kind of went back and forth between IT and operations throughout my career, I was actually, valued pretty highly, especially when I moved to operations, because they looked to me as someone who can actually really build the bridge between IT and operations, right? Because I had empathy for IT, I had empathy for operations. I would actually bring, both of them together in a much probably more collaborative way than the previous leaders were able to do. So that was my kind of biggest contribution, to be able to connect the dots, if you will, in the entirety of supply chain, by understanding the supply chain issues and by marrying them with the technology that can solve the large-scale, complex supply chain problems. So after the factory automation, factory planning, if you will, I actually worked for a software company, i2 Technologies, as Tim mentioned in the introduction. That actually also has changed my career significantly, because it was the first time, late 1990s, that you can actually really solve complex problems with computing, because the computing power was expensive. It wasn't even there back then. That you wouldn't be able to. I remember taking classes in operations research, and I would just try to understand how you would solve them back then. But it was really not possible to solve some of those large-scale problems because the technology was not there. And i2 Technologies was one of the first companies that actually really solved that in the marketplace, that has actually leveraged the computing power technology to solve some advanced supply chain planning problems. And this is what I learned, basically, more or less, going from a factory environment to a software company where you deal with some clients that are actually trying to solve the big supply chain issues that they have. Just 1 second. It's actually a irony that my boss is calling me, so it always happens, right? When you're in the middle of something that you cannot kind of stop. Okay, so from i2 world, again, that kind of really opened up doors for me, because especially at the time, that was right at the end of year 2000, if you will, where a lot of companies were also investing to deal with the Y2K problem, and they were putting a lot of money into retooling their information technologies to be able to deal with the Y2K problem. So they also leveraged that time period, if you will, to make some improvements in their supply chain systems. And in the i2 world, I kind of worked on at the large scale program implementation. Like, I have worked at IBM server group. I have worked for some semiconductor companies like National Semiconductor. I have worked at Dell Computer back then, where we were trying to figure out, for example, how to make them more nimble in terms of the make-to-order environment, build-to-order environment by using the system, so on and so forth. So from then on, basically, I kind of decided that I would again go back to the operations and try to understand a little bit better in terms of what's going on in operations. And throughout my career, I have assumed roles. You know, people ask me how I got what I got. I can't answer specifically how I got the positions that I got. A lot of the things that I would say is, I was very curious about things. I had good problem solving skills. I had collaborative skills to be able to bring people together to work on the problem. But all of that combined, I was able to kind of really make big impacts in, wherever I had worked for, right? Because, one of the things that I kind of dig for in my career was where the problem is, where the biggest problems are. Almost sometimes I even wanted to solve the problems that have been attempted to be solved before. And people look to me like, are you crazy to take on those problems? Because people fail, they have lost their jobs, right? But I kind of looked at it as, whatever might not have worked in the past, there are probably good reasons for it. There's a reason why it didn't work. Maybe the timing was not right. Maybe the project team was not right. Maybe the execution was not right. But I always wanted to go solve big problems. At least something that's going to transform, the a supply chain function, a planning functions, a purchasing function, a logistics function. Because everything, I'm not the person who actually, even in operations, can take a kind of a stable operational capability and kind of be it in the maintenance mode, because that's not me. Me is more like, I want to go and make a change and drive a change and make a big impact, at least get the organization to get over that chasm that they couldn't get over for years. So maybe if you're trying to get one thing out of this conversation, I tell people, one of the reasons why I succeeded is not only I was curious, but I was also maybe a little bit crazy in terms of signing up for risky things that most people would try to stay away, or most people would actually try to kind of really avoid even. And so, when you look at the experience that I had, going back and forth between IT and operations, then I'm going to come to Amazon. As all of you know, Amazon is actually a tech company, right, with a great execution in operations. We should never ignore that part. And my skill set is, when they approached me late last year, I thought it would be a great thing for me to join, because, I have the tech background, supply chain tech background, and I have the operations background. Then I can actually leverage my skills at Amazon. That's the group that I work at, which is the Supply Chain Optimization Technologies Group. The name is actually literally what it means. What we do in here is we actually develop, build, maintain large-scale supply chain systems that actually really serve the Amazon network and Amazon customers. A lot of the supply chain systems can be even, forecasting the 5 million part numbers that we sell through the Amazon marketplace, right? And would be to kind of figure out how to place that inventory in the network. And it might seem simple, but as an Amazon customer, you might realize the scale is so big, and you have to make really very precise decisions in terms of what you're going to buy, what you're going to place, how you're going to place, how you're going to move, and how you're going to commit to the customer. Because even the promise dates that you get from the website when you order something is a lot of hard work in the back end, with a lot of algorithmic and operations research science applied to it, with the help of computing power that spits out the answer to you in less than a few milliseconds, right? So the organization has, my current responsibility is I have responsibility for what we call, drop ship product, which is the stuff that gets actually shipped directly from the suppliers, basically like the big stuff that you order from Amazon, example, furniture. The other thing that actually, the other part of my responsibility is, is the connection between Amazon and its partners, and which is the EDI and API integration platform that we have. And the third piece that we have, that I have, is basically I look after the cross-functional supply chain optimization initiatives, and I have technical program managers and technical product managers to be able to orchestrate the cross-functional initiatives across multiple functions like forecasting, inventory planning, fulfillment, and sourcing and purchasing. So that's kind of what I wanted to, kick off the conversation with. I see that there is already some hands being raised. So that's exactly what I want. I want this to be interactive, to be dialogue based. Just I'm here to answer your questions. And let's kind of start with whomever wants to ask the first question.
Go ahead, Isa.
Hi. So you have a lot of technical skills. I'm wondering, how do you use those skills at the VP level?
So your technical depth, understanding of your technical depth when you go up the chain reduces, obviously, especially when the technology advances so fast. So I would not consider myself perhaps a technically depth person, but I would consider myself more, I also benefited from that, to having a broader understanding of the technology, because I have chosen to manage and lead teams. There are roles or positions wherever you go at Amazon or elsewhere that will require the technical depth, right? So I wouldn't consider that the role that I have would require me to be technically very, very deeply competent, but I know enough to be dangerous, if you will, as they say it, right? I would be able to, I learned how to actually increase my horizons across the spectrum rather than going deeper and deeper into a subject matter area. I'm deeper in certain subject matter areas. For example, when it comes to supply chain tech, I can really understand the supply chain technology when it comes to planning and purchasing, right? But I have a good understanding of the technology and the technology stack that's needed to be able to support the other supply chain functions as well. I don't know if I answered your question, Isa, but you can ask a follow-on question for sure.
No, that's great. I was just wondering, I mean, you're not looking at code anymore, but would you say, we're not going to buy that product is crap, like what?
I wouldn't be able, I mean, you're talking about codes of, millions of lines of codes, right? First of all, I do not have the technical depth to be able to ascertain that. What I have is to be able to ask the right questions to ascertain whether the right due diligence has been given, and to make sure that the right governance processes have been followed to be able to introduce the product into the production system, right? I can actually, what we call in Amazon, we are expected to have great inspection skills at the leadership level. In order to inspect something, you need to know that. You need to be able to ask the right question. Otherwise, you don't know what you're inspecting, right? For example, our product reviews, our code reviews, and all that stuff, I wouldn't look at the code. I would ensure that all the check marks have been, satisfied, if you will, before you make sure that this is actually passing the sniff test, if you will. And you might say, isn't that easy? Yes, it's easy and difficult because sometimes you need to be also very careful about the answers that you get given. I think the great technologist is not only not only ask great questions, but also ask the right follow-on great questions, right? Because that's very, very important. I mean, if somebody says, I have done I'll make an example from the software development world. I have done the integration testing, right? That's not the only question that you need to ask, right? You need to be asking basically, what are the integration points that you have tested, right? What are the problems that you have solved? How many bugs you had in the integration testing? How did you deal with that? How many are remaining? Why do you not want to solve everything, but also solve the critical ones? Let me take a look at the non-critical ones and make an assessment whether I think it's critical or not. So things as such, basically, that you develop over time to be able to not only ask the right questions, but ask the right follow-on questions. Go deep in asking the questions.
I'd like to make a comment. May I?
Of course.
Go ahead.
Mete, you are an excellent example of a successful graduate of our department. You are a T-shaped individual. That has been the goal and symbol of our department. The goal is to create T-shaped individuals. The stem of it is the technical skills, and the top of it is the breadth that you are going to be able to ask the right question and understand if the answer is valid. You are a perfect example. I'm glad that our department is successful in doing that. Congratulations to you. And I really am proud of you.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to the education that I got at PSU and the guidance that I got from you and others who were teaching at the time. And honestly, the best thing that I tell people who are going through, education, understanding the subject is good, but understanding the holistic picture, being able to really expand your horizons across the broader areas of things. I think that's the greatest value of the education that, one can get at, engineering and management department at PSU. Because, whatever I have been taught, it's really applying them was really a lot of fun because you can apply that across almost a lot of different things, right? Understanding, really creating that curiosity, being able to ask the right questions. I owe a lot to the education that I have received, not only at PSU, but other institutions that I have received. So it's not only the topic competency, it's the kind of really how you integrate those topics to create your toolbox to be able to succeed.
I mean, I'll just expand on and introduce, for those in attendance that don't know him, Dr. Kakaglu is our founding department chair for our department, founded the department back in 1987. And so it's great having you here for this, as well as Mete's the embodiment of a lot of what we do with then, according to LinkedIn, 18% of all of our alumni are the vice president, director, or higher level in their organizations now. So we try to help prepare people to be leaders of their organizations. Jerry Williams here, Dr. Jerry Williams is another one of our attendees today. And he too is a graduate of our department and has his own practice, construction engineering management research, and took classes back in the day and worked alongside Mete back at Portland State.
Yeah, we were even office mates for a year.
That's right. Jerry and I were office mates, back then. It's 1990s, right, Jerry?
1995, wasn't it? 95. Yeah.
That sounds right. I actually started in 1994, September, at PSU Engineering Management Department. So tying to this kind of talk, right? Are there any other people who have some questions? Because I have a few more things to say. My slides are not done. At least the thoughts that I had in my mind, I haven't finished them yet. But give me humor me a few more minutes, perhaps. A lot of people ask me, and I say that sincerely from the bottom of my heart. People ask me how I succeeded, right? What happened? What were the factors in your success? Some of you might have that question, might be shy to ask that question. I'll go ahead and answer that before you even ask that question, right? I'll actually kind of, uh, I'll put them into different categories. There are three or four factors, right? One of them is you can never ignore, it might sound odd, but I was lucky. Lucky in the sense that, for example, I did not have any health issues that got into my way of, working, right? I call it as a luck, because you might be unlucky not to be able to have that opportunity to work, right? And, part of it is, I was perhaps, at the right time, at the right place. That's part of luck. You can never ignore that, right? A lot of people at my level would never admit that, but I vocally criticize them if they say it's all about me. It's not all about me. There is not a bit, there is quite a bit of, luck that plays at all. Never lose that, never forget that, right? The second piece, as I have kind of alluded maybe when I was introducing myself, be bold, take risks, especially, I don't know the audience attending this. I used to take a lot of risks when I was younger. My risk appetite, I kind of feel like, is going down now when I get, older and older. But still, it's actually change departments, change companies. Don't be satisfied with your status quo, right? Be like, not be comfortable with what you are. If you kind of ever reach that comfort zone, there's something wrong with it, right? Because, yes, we get paid to do the job. I tell people, doing the job gets you the paycheck, not the promotion. Because you're hired for doing the job. If you don't do the job, you will get fired anyhow, right? Or you will kind of face some bad consequences, right? But, really, when I think about, as I said, how I got there is really did some crazy things that people were not even willing to take on. And of course, do it kind of calculate the risk, do it cleverly. It's not just jump into a hot water that's kind of really going to burn you completely, right? The third piece that I advise to people is, it's whether you like it or not, my work ethics was always there. Yes, I was smart, but I worked hard too. I really worked hard, right? I mean, I tell people, if somebody says I can actually be where I am because I'm so smart, it might be pure luck, right? Without work ethics, it won't get you there, right? And the fourth piece that's very, very important, that's probably something that I maybe was not taught exactly like that in the engineering management department, the importance of having right managers, right? Especially when you move up the chain, it's very, very critical, right? To be able to work for the right person. I tell people, it doesn't matter what company you work for. If you work for a jerk, that takes the entire glamour of working for that greatest company. Because at the end of the day, your work-life balance, the projects that you get assigned to, the opportunities that you find, even the advocacy that you would get when it comes to the promotion decisions, it will all come down to your managers. So when I was changing jobs, for example, when you look at my LinkedIn profile, I'm quite a bit of a changer. This is my 7th company, I believe, right? People would say, oh my God, you're probably not a good one to hire because you keep changing jobs every 2-3 years or 4 years. But the point is, I did not go work for a company blindly. I actually worked for a person whom I worked with in the past or whom I knew, right? When I was selecting the company and the job. Even the job that I'm working at right now, I made a huge change to go from being a king in the semiconductor industry, if you will, for 28 years, coming to a retail industry. But I did not come here because, yes, I love Amazon, but I also kind of knew the person, at least the initial manager, that I was going to work for. It's very, very important. So in order to do that, you can understand the implications of that. You need to really spend time on building networks, creating networks with people, keeping in touch with them, so on and so on. So these are kind of really when people, of course, the educational background, the formational, education that we have received, when growing up and all that stuff all played a role, right? But these are probably the 4 or 5 things that I would leave you with in terms of what were the key success factors for me to get to where I am in the industry.
Great. Other questions, comments?
Well, one thing, Mete, I'd like to say that, and you did a very good job of saying this. While luck does play a great role, you do a lot of things to improve your luck.
Sure.
And that's you have to be in the right place at the right time. I can tell you that for a fact. At least my experience has been that way. But you put yourself in the right place at the right time too.
Sure.
And
sure.
And you pick those. You find those people that you're going to follow up, or they're going to help your career, and you. I mean, that's basically, you explain that yourself. But I think that's an important concept too, is what can you do to help your luck, help yourself to be better or more lucky at making those decisions.
And if you break the luck into 2 components, controllable and uncontrollable, for sure, you're going to be in charge of your controllable luck, right? There is some luck things that happen in life to you, like the health example that I have given. Yes, I was luckily healthy enough to be able to work. I could have had some serious problems in my health that could have gotten into my way. So definitely, I agree with you. You got to be in charge of your kind of steering your luck that you can control, like building networks, being able to work for people that you look up to, right? Because, if I did not follow these recommendations that I'm making, I believe, especially the manager part, it's so near and dear to my heart. I tell people, if there is one person in life that actually, determines your happiness in life, if you will, your spouse and your manager. They make a huge difference in how you actually really, how your happiness shapes up. You're on mute.
Any other questions or comments? So I found it really admirable, all the moving and success you've had, and the fact that you moved from Singapore. Was it moving from Singapore back to Seattle then in the Pacific Northwest? Was that the recent move?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I was lucky enough to be able to make the move. Like, for example, I moved from Portland, Oregon down to Bay Area. Then I moved from Bay Area to Austin, Texas. From Austin, Texas, I moved to Singapore. Singapore came back to Bay Area. Back in January, I moved back to my home place, Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Washington. Yes, I spent about 5 years in Singapore, Tim, as an expatriate.
Well, we're really glad to have you back in the Pacific Northwest. And so next time you're down here in Portland, please look us up. I'd love to give you a tour around and welcome you back. We're, in a different building compared to when you started, I think, back at PSU long ago. So
yeah, we were in that dormitory. I don't even remember the name of it.
Yes.
When I first
Andy.
started. Yes. But I have seen the new building.
Yep.
I have seen it.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Great. I think this has been wonderful, and we had great discussion. So thanks much, and again, welcome back, and congratulations on all your successes, both from hard work, some luck, and everything else. So
Thank you so much. Thanks for
I
having
send
me.
my congratulations once again, Mete. You're doing very well, and you're an extremely good example of what success means.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Kokaglu.
great.